Hi, and welcome to Concussion Talk Podcast. I'm Nick Mercer. This is episode 69. I'll be talking about innovation in rehabilitation with Motus Nova CEO David Wu and Director of Clinical Research Dr. Nick Housley. Concussion Talk Podcast is presented by HeadCheck Health. HeadCheck Health bridges the gaps in concussion care through simple, powerful technology. Join organizations like the Canadian Football League, Track Factory Racing, the Canadian Junior Hockey League, Eastern Washington University, and Volleyball Canada, who rely on HeadCheck Health to improve communication and optimize care. Visit headcheckhealth.com for more. I'm joined by CEO Dave Wu and Director of Clinical Research Dr. Nick Housley of Motus Nova. And Dave Wu, can you just please introduce yourself and talk about, give us a bit of a background and talk about what Motus Nova is for everyone else out there?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having us. My name is David Wu. I am the CEO of Motus Nova, and we make a telehealth robotic device for physical therapy. We're happy to be here today, and we're hoping to talk about telehealth and what we do.
Yeah, can you give us a bit of background on where did you go to school, and your business or scientific background?
Sure, yeah. So I studied chemistry and operations on the business side. So I kind of straddle both sides of the fence on both the science and the business side at Emory. Ever since I've been an entrepreneur. So I've done this will be my third startup, and it's been quite the wild ride. Both ups and the downs. And you guys are in Atlanta, Georgia. Is that correct? That's right.
Is that where you guys are both from, or did you just move to Atlanta because you originally from Atlanta, or where?
That's a good question. I grew up mostly in the Northeast, upstate New York, and in Connecticut. And I moved to Atlanta at this point about 14, 15 years ago. And been calling myself Atlantean ever since.
Nice. So where is Emory University? Is that in Atlanta?
That's right. Yes, Emory University is in Atlanta, Georgia. That's right.
Okay. And Dr. Housley, or Nick, as I would say, this is a good name, light name.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Nick, for having us.
What is your role, your background, and your role at Motus Nova?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Dr. Nick Housley. My role at Motus is the Director of Clinical Research and Development. So that's basically anything that involves sort of scientific background, anything that involves making sure the devices and the interventions are clinically appropriate, and also helping kind of bridge the gap between our clinical partners who are using our device for telehealth use now, and the patients and our engineering teams. So I kind of straddle those arenas.
Great.
Yeah, and my background is a little bit different than Dave's. I'm actually a physiologist by training, so my undergraduate degree was in physiology, and then I went and got a doctorate of physical therapy, and that's kind of where I originally met Dave at this point. Dave was running some of the clinical trials, and that I was involved in as a student. And we started working together back then on the device. And then after I completed that degree and did some practice, I went and got a PhD in neuroscience, and primarily study sort of sensory motor control of limb function. So I kind of got some of the basic science and clinical science behind the device's use.
Very useful. So I guess, Dave, if you tell us about this, what is this? I've seen the hand mentor and the foot mentor.
Yeah.
And is that what are those devices, and are there any other stuff that same genre?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, like you said, our two main products are the Hand Mentor and the Foot Mentor. We describe them as robotic exoskeletons or robot exoskeletons. It's really just a fancy way of saying it's something that you wear that is on your limb. So the Hand Mentor onto your hand and arm, and the Foot Mentor around your foot and your ankle. And then the robotic part simply means that it's capable of moving on its own. It's capable of helping you with movement. So the really therapeutic part about what we're able to do is that we're able to, much like a real life physical therapist, or I should say much like an in-person physical therapist, can help and move you through therapeutic exercises in a rehabilitation setting. We're able to replicate the physical elements of that with our robotic device. And I'm sure we'll get to this later, but our current application is really exciting. And what we're doing is we're serving as a telehealth platform. We're having our robots controlled remotely by clinicians who are then able to practice physical therapy at a distance, especially in these kind of times where infection control and access is a big concern.
Oh, yeah, actually, that's very apt, because I was just going to ask you about the telehealth and the AI robotic devices. So if you both kind of attack it from different angles, and David, you can tell us what it actually is and like what the product is, and Dr. Housley, Dr. Nick, it's called Nick.
Nick is that's fine.
Nick, just what it means to a physiotherapist or any clinician really who's using it. So, I guess, Dave, could you tell us what it is, how they work together, telehealth?
That's
one thing work together.
Absolutely. So, I'll start with just kind of more the practical wrapper, and I think Nick can kind of talk more about the clinician experience. And telehealth, it's not a new concept. It's something that we've been practicing for a very long time, many years. And it's evolved over time. And today, what telehealth really means is to most people, I should say, telehealth to most people in most instances, it's a video chat between a clinician and a patient. And typically what would happen is a patient would describe, this is what's wrong with me, and maybe the clinician can ask some questions. And many of those telehealth sessions result in, I will, as a clinician, maybe I'll prescribe something or ask you to do something differently, or maybe, this is serious and you need to come in. Really what it is, a lot of these telehealth sessions are just assessments. They're kind of a step one to step two, step three in the healthcare chain. Kind of the only area maybe is psychiatry or psychology, where the treatment itself, both the assessment and the treatment, it can be done just by through a lot of the treatment can be done, I should say, through just kind of talking and speaking with each other. And that's kind of what we really emphasize. Excuse me, that telehealth currently for physical therapy, the needs are a little bit different, right? If you compare that to a psychology or psychiatry, the treatment is talking or having conversations on one side. In physical therapy, you really need to, much of it involves some kind of physical movement, touching and moving, the clinician touching and moving the patient. And that tactile part is so important to both the experience of the patient and the experience of the clinician. And what we're doing here with our exoskeleton robot is we're able to replicate the physical tactile element of both being able for the clinician to move the patient and for the clinician to sense the patient, right? See, as a clinician, I want to assess if I wanted to assess how impaired a patient was. You can't. It's really difficult to do that through a video chat. Just kind of visually watching someone. Being able to measure the forces and the movements of someone through our device, kind of through all the sensors that we have on our robot, that can really recreate this patient clinic experience, and that's kind of what we really bring. Motus Nova brings to the table with the hand mentor, with the foot mentor, to really make telehealth for physical therapy something that matches matches the experience of physical therapy in a real life clinic.
Right.
Yeah, and I'd just quickly add on to that, Dave. I think you're exactly right. This the evaluative process, the PT/OT eval that traditionally happens in the clinic is a very, very difficult thing to replicate in a telehealth platform, where you can't have hands-on patient, you can't feel end feel of a joint, you can't feel resistance to movement, and as you said, the sensors can really help augment those gaps. But the device, since it was originally conceptualized to be, developed to be an interventional tool, the device really shines in its ability to deliver interventions remotely. So just as a quick background, I mean, the background of the device is that the scientists and the engineers were chiefly involved in the development of constraint-induced movement therapy, or this is probably some of the best...
Sorry, Nick, can you just read that last one to the words? The device was went through that time when the monkey there.
Sure, yeah. So, no worries. Yeah. So the device was originally inspired by constraint-induced movement therapy. People may have heard of this as CIMT. And this was some of the best, sort of most effective evidence we have for the capacity of the brain to rewire after a neurologic injury. And these scientists, after figuring out that these interventions worked, quickly realized that it just doesn't work in terms of like our normal insurance sort of healthcare industry in the United States. So this just happened to be along the same lines as when sort of the technical elements of robotics were meeting healthcare, and they designed these tools to help sort of supplant or augment what was being done in the CIMT approaches, where the device is used to help basically amplify the number of movements that someone has, or help them get the number of repetitions to actually induce those positive changes. So the device really does shine, not only in the evaluation, but also in the capacity to deliver highly effective therapies.
What I think is so cool is that the use of telehealth is obviously so important right now today because of the COVID concerns and the social, physical distancing and things, but the use of AI as well, so that people can actually use this. Exercises can be given by physicians and by not physicians, but by clinicians, physiotherapists and OTs, and they can. How does that work? They program the device remotely, or they just say, I want you to do this type of movement?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, I mean, one of the largest concerns now is that it's actually a two-sided problem, right? One side is a lot of these clinicians are being furloughed, or they're not actually having access to their patients because maybe their institute or their clinic has some rules now to keep the density of people in a given space lower. And so they're not able to use their skilled services to help people that need it.
And what Nick means by that, this is just one example. I think last week I was talking to a clinic manager. They were able to bring 3 or 4 patients in at the same time, simultaneously, and have 3 or 4 clinicians treat them. But now, because of state laws on distancing, that clinic can only have one individual there at a time. And of course, this is going to be different from every clinic depending on how these clinics are situated. But because of distancing requirements, you can see sometimes a halving of the capacity of some of these clinics, and that's both an issue for clinicians and for patients.
Yeah, so we have this kind of two-sided problem, and having an ability to sort of extend the reach, be able to operate outside of the standard clinical environment is really, really valuable, because those people on both sides need to deliver their services, and they also need to access that care. And so how this kind of works in practice is, you're exactly right, Nick. What ends up happening is the therapist, once they get engaged with a patient, they establish secure connections and they perform an evaluation. You can imagine this very much like a standard PT/OT visit. You're going to have some portion of that time we're going to be talking about what's kind of going on, history of your disease, what kind of movement limitations, what kind of goals you have. And then you go into objective movement screening, where you can use the audiovisual feedback on the platform as well as the kinematic and kinetic feedback. And what those terms mean are basically, kinematics is movement, so kind of range of motions, those types of things. And kinetics is like the forces applied. So we can figure out with the device on someone's limb, we can figure out how much they can move, how strong their muscles are, and where they may need help. And with that information, it's kind of consolidated and presented to the clinician, the provider. They can use that information to develop treatment programs that will help that individual increase their range of motion, increase their strength, and increase functional capacity of their arm or leg in this case. So it's very much like a standard kind of therapy session. It's just now, instead of your hands being directly on the individual or your eyes being directly on them, you just have the sort of intermediary of the audiovisual from the device and the device being able to tell how they're moving.
Yeah, and the clinician during this in-person session is able to watch all of this data coming from the device.
So they use this so it's in person as well as remotely.
They can.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yes, and it's our device is used. Has been used over the past 5-10 years in hundreds of clinics all over the U.S. In person specifically. And we've essentially, because this is a robot device, we are, and it's cloud connected, we have been able to replicate all of the in-person experience, but have kind of the readouts, rather than it be on the screen itself of the in-person device, have that readout be on the screen of a clinician in a remote location. We have patients that will travel to a specific clinic to get rehab with our robot therapy device. And now they don't have to do that, because we can send the robot therapy device to the home and have that same experience. And I want to answer your question about something you had mentioned earlier about the AI. Just as Nick said, in the session that is done with the clinician's able to essentially program the device, the hand mentor, the foot mentor, to match what the clinician thinks are the best suited needs of each individual. Let's say that Johnny, just pulling out patient Johnny, is able to move 10 degrees of movement, let's say up and down, 5 degrees up and 5 degrees down, 5 degrees into flexion and extension, maybe terms that clinicians would use. And then the clinician can assign exercises, assign therapeutic interventions based on that information to move that 5 degrees and up and 5 degrees down. And then later, after the in-person session, if Johnny logs back onto the device on his own, because Johnny is a rock star and wants to do more hours of therapy, Johnny can continue to do the exercises assigned, and by the way, all this is accountable, right? The clinician can see if Johnny's doing his homework that's been assigned to him. All the while,
they do, yeah.
I mean, there's no. This is something we always say. This is a little bit of tangent, but there's no magic pill to physical therapy. As anyone that's gone through physical therapy can tell you, there's no secret words. There's no password. There's no black magic that you have to put in the hours. I mean, for better or for worse, it's about the amount of practice you do. It's just like going to Carnegie Hall. Maybe that's a mannerism. It's just like being a concert violinist, right? Practice, practice, practice. That's how you get there. Very similar with physical therapy. So when Johnny's doing these practice sessions, and all of a sudden Johnny moves, instead of his typical 5 degrees up, maybe he moves 7 degrees up. If Johnny were just at home doing this with a stretch band or something else, some let's say dumb device, not a smart device, no one would notice that. But in this case, on the hand mentor, the foot mentor, on the Motus devices, that 7 degrees would immediately be captured by the AI, and then the clinician could have set, okay, if Johnny can exceed these bounds that I've initially set, if Johnny's able to hit 7 degrees, the device will automatically make the exercise
adjustment,
the adjustment to make it more challenging, so that Johnny's now having to do 7 to complete each of his movement cycles, and this kind of it's like having a personal trainer that is always there and watching and making sure that the practice that you're getting is very the most efficient and effective it can be, so that you can reach your movement.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about, Dave, is basically this idea of the sufficiency of the stimulus, right? We talk about the dose is really, really important for improving your functional use of your extremity, and making sure that the intensity of the exercise that you're doing is of sufficient quality is really, really important, right? Things have to be challenging enough to drive a change. Otherwise, you're not ever going to get the appropriate stimulus to make those changes. And so having that ability to constantly monitor, it's not only in the up too, right? What happens if you're an hour into a therapy session and you start to experience some fatigue, right? What can happen then is your motor performance may go down slightly. The device can detect that and can accommodate it in the opposite direction, where it will start to make it a little bit easier.
Or provide more assistance.
Provide more assistance, exactly. And that's simply because one of the most important factors here is not how much you can do day to day or within one day. It's about how much you can do over the long haul. And staying motivated is exceptionally important. And if you can continue to see some successes in the day, even when you are fatigued, that will give you more motivation to continue the next day and the day after. And I think one thing that you kind of just touched on here, Dave, is that we didn't really talk about the device, kind of the assistance capabilities. Maybe you want to talk about that as well, about, it actually has, so Dave suggested there are some sensors on board the device where it can basically digitize your motion as far as capturing these kinematic data. But then the device also has the ability, an externalized muscle, the assistance capabilities to help, for the clinicians listening, it would be effectively like removing the effect of gravity or helping to remove some of the tone that may impair someone from extending their wrist and hand.
Yes, so it's like just as Nick is saying, it's an air muscle that's on board. It's a pneumatic muscle. That's just a fancy way of saying it's an air muscle. And air muscles are nice because they provide a very gentle force that can be resisted. You can push back against it. And
it's very, very low likely to actually induce a spasticity or a really aggravate tone.
That's right. Yeah, it's like it's like a balloon, if you can imagine, and that you can it's pushing you in a certain direction and for for the hand, for the foot, and extension and deflection and various movements. But it can be resisted, it can be pushed back against, and it's not jerking you around. The movement is gradual, and it's not kind of this robotic you might when we say robot, you might think of on an assembly line these robots zipping around. That's a linear actuator. Those are electric motors. They're great for Teslas, great for cars, but not great for physical therapy,
rehab,
right? For small gradual movements. No, thank you, Nick. What we call active rehabilitation, but really what that means is the device is capable of moving you. Of moving the user, and that's completely adjustable based on the clinician as to how much of assistance to give. And kind of the analogy I like to use is it's like training wheels. It's like when you learn to ride a bicycle. You have training wheels that kind of help you complete kind of this movement or this skill that you're trying to learn. And then over time, you want to gradually take away the training wheels because if you're providing too much assistance all of the time, at a certain point, you're not going to be. The training is not going to be effective in getting you to get better. But you don't want to also remove the training wheels too quickly, right? Because that would be too much of a cliff.
Yeah. Too much of a burden.
So it's really key how that we keep the assistance and the goals appropriate to the users at all times, between days as maybe they get better, and like Nick said, even within a day where typically somebody's performance will maybe
ebb and flow.
Based on maybe they're warming up and they'll get a little bit better, and then and later on they'll get tired and they won't be able to do as much. And it's really important that you kind of dynamically adjust all of the various variables of assistance, resistance, how much movement is being done, the intensity, all of that to the specific user. And that entire adjustment is done by the machine entirely, and we call that AI. I mean, that artificial intelligence is what handles all that decision making as to what is best for that individual user.
Yeah, and that's also, I mean, if we're talking about like how clinicians can benefit from that, right? I mean, I guess maybe AI is maybe a scary term for some clinicians who are not used to this type of technology, but it can really actually provide some valuable help for the providers here.
And data, I think, too.
Oh, the data is incredible. I mean, we're sampling. Let me just I'll just pose a typical example here is, if you go and you do an evaluation, you may put a goniometer on someone one or two times.
And to quickly interrupt, Nick, what you're describing here is a typical in-person
exactly. Yep.
Usual, without a robotic device, what you would see in physical therapy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so during these evaluations, you may get a few sort of snapshots of someone's range of motion, right? When you put them on a table, you check a hip range of motion, you check range of motion, maybe even a full body screen. But those are only snapshots, right?
It's just that day.
And it's just that day, exactly. Yeah, and so, but having the instrumentation that's on the individual day in and day out for many, many hours, and we're sampling those movements and those forces something like 50 times a second, we're able to get not only snapshots, but we're able to get time series of data and to figure out how their movement is changing as we do different interventions. And so that insight can give a lot of feedback to the provider so they can adjust their decision making. Maybe I want to try X and see what the response is, or try Y and see what the response is. They can then modify their practice to individuals on a much more granular level. And also, too, I'd say that the AI is valuable because maybe they can sort of dip their toe into the data as much as they want to. They don't necessarily have to go full-in data scientist and go look at all the time series. Maybe they want to look at the summary statistics to start with and see, hey, on aggregate, what's happening? What's their response to X, Y, and Z? So it kind of it has a spectrum of involvement. But yes, certainly the data is a valuable add to the provider's tool bag here.
Yeah, our goal is to present as much data and control to the clinician as much as possible within the limited time frame that the clinician has to spend with each individual. It would be great if Johnny's OT can be with him every day, 8 hours a day. And this is kind of what, going back to constraint-induced movement therapy, these trials kind of tried to do. That would be ideal. That would be the perfect world kind of situation.
There just aren't that many clinicians out there. There just physically aren't that many people.
And that's the reality that we're in. So our goal with this robot is for the clinician to do kind of the high level thinking, the decision making, and then let the robot after it's programmed,
take those commands and execute them. On a daily basis, an hourly basis, second basis.
And if you can imagine, it's like if you're directing cars or directing traffic, the clinicians telling where these cars.
An orchestra.
That's good. An orchestra. The conductor is kind of giving these large movements and as to how we're going to proceed, but it's up to the individual violinists to make a decision on how to play their instrument. We want to take away some of this burden from clinicians with the AI, so that we can replicate as much as we can this constant experience while having the clinician being respectful of the clinician's time.
I want to ask you all about your interest in brain injury, but before that, you've talked a little bit Carnegie Hall and orchestras and stuff. So who's the violinist or piano player or whatever?
I'm a cellist. I played it in symphony back in the day. It's been a while, but yeah.
And I guess I played the piano, though it's been many years. It's been many years, so that's not something I think I freely admit to anymore. Yeah.
It's like the analogy, dude. Okay, also, if anyone goes to motusnova.com, they'll see that a lot of it is just like straight up right away. It's brain injury and stroke. So was this device inspired by that, or was this incidental that you decided that this will work for that? We wanted to make this device, and this device broke up for brain injury people. Or was it brain injury and stroke survivors?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the technology behind Motus Nova, behind the Hand Mentor, these clinical trials that were done by these scientists and these engineers, they were tailored specifically. Originally, they were tailored specifically for brain injury, because what they saw was that so many of these individuals with brain injuries, such as a stroke, such as a traumatic brain injury, there were so many of these individuals that were getting undertreated, that the healthcare system was not getting them all of the rehab that they needed, whether that be the insurance company that denied additional treatments, or just the impracticability
not enough providers
of scheduling or driving to or accessing care. That was such a big problem that
I know as a brain injury person that some of this difficulty get access to care because of the translation and just getting there.
Absolutely. And so much so that the U.S. government, by the National Institutes of Health, funded some of these initial research studies into how can we solve this problem of this vast undertreatment, and can we solve that with a robot. And this research kind of started in the early 2000s, 2003, 2004. Where the idea of this using a robotic intervention to address some of this undertreatment started. And so to your question, yes, very much brain injury is at the inspiration and the heart of what makes our device what it is today. But as the scientists developed these devices and talking to other clinicians, clinicians that treated orthopedic injuries or maybe even repetitive use injuries like a carpal tunnel or something like that. These other clinicians said, hey, what you guys have here, what this technology you have, I can really see it being used, and specifically to address my patients that have maybe tennis elbow. Or other conditions. So I guess to bring this all together, what we're finding out from feedback from clinicians is that even though this was inspired for brain injury and stroke survivors specifically, it really can be applied to, and is currently being applied to in some cases with some clinicians, to all sorts of other injuries, ranging from sports injuries to repetitive use injuries.
And Nick, did you use these devices or these computer interventions, robotic interventions, when you were studying either physical therapy or neuroscience?
Yeah, very much so. So back in, I guess it's been a while now, but even in 2013 to probably 2017, we were using these devices in academic and clinical interventions, where we were studying, specific sort of hypothesis-driven questions, as well as some of these large sort of, they call it QI trials, or quality improvement trials, to improve the quality of care in various institutes. And so we were using these devices in the real world. And we were using these specifically, you brought up sort of scheduling and traveling constraints. We had these studies in a large partnership and a sort of a long-term partnership with the Veterans Administration in the United States, the VA, where these devices were specifically used to overcome many of those barriers. Right? Can we help people who live very far away from a clinic, people who don't have the capacity to travel, or maybe don't have the means to travel? Can we put these devices remotely in their homes and help them get access to care? So yeah, we have, and I've been involved in utilizing these from a scientific and actual clinician perspective.
Great. Well, with that, it sounds ideal if you can get these devices to people who need them, and like you're saying, mobility and transportation are a big hurdle to people with stroke survivors and brain injury survivors and other spinal cord, for example.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
And other orthopedic injuries.
And the other really kind of important thing about the device itself, I mean, I think one of the actually very first questions you asked was, what other types of devices are out there? There are hundreds of robotic devices out there. We actually did a review chapter several years ago now, where we identified well over 250 devices in the world.
And this is Nick on an academic
pursuit. An academic pursuit, where we were reviewing, just trying to figure out what is out there. And there's a lot. The vast majority of these devices are sort of at the scientific project phase, where there's like a one-off device in someone's lab in some institute, right?
There's one or two of these in the world,
exactly.
And there's two people that know how to build them, and you have to kind of fly to the Institute of Robotics at
whatever university
to try it.
So there are a lot of devices, and there are even a number of let's say larger scale devices, so maybe consumer large scale types of devices, but most of them are dedicated to be used in the clinic. Or maybe in the university hospital system. There aren't any other devices out there that are active assist robotic devices that have the scientific backing that are able to be used in the home and a fully tele-health platform. This is the only one that's out there right now.
Yeah, and this. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, I don't talk to you. Please.
It's just to go off that point, to add to it. The Motus Nova Hand Mentor and Foot Mentor, we're an FDA Class 1 device. So we've been through several clinical trials, the largest of which was a randomized controlled trial done at Emory University here in Atlanta, and also with the site at the Cleveland Clinic in Cleveland, Ohio. Great national, top national hospitals. And all of these robotics talk about getting access as one of their goals, right? When you propose these ideas, and giving access to more patients is at the heart of a lot of these pursuits in robotics. But we really took that idea to heart, and not only was designing a robotic device that was clinically, scientifically sound, but it also needed to be operationally and financially sound. I mean, it's money. We haven't really talked about that yet today, but I think that as with many of these technologies that are talked about, these great new technologies, often what's overlooked is how much it costs. Some of these great, flying cars, I see those, but when you try to figure out, is that practical?
Yeah, what are the economics behind this?
There's no, I'm not, there's no, I'm glad that we can fly around the moon. I can send people around the moon, but that's not, space tourism is happening, but that's not something that's accessible, generally speaking, to the public. So we really took that accessibility to heart, not only building a robot that would be able to help clinicians provide a higher level and greater amount of care with the limited time that they have. We also really looked at and emphasized the financial cost, the financial burden, I should even say, to both the patient and to clinicians. And currently how we are partnering with clinics in our telehealth model, we are actually providing the device to clinics and clinicians to use with their patients, and there's no upfront charges. They don't have to buy a device. There's no there's no monthly fees or anything like that. For clinics and clinicians, it's actually a charge as part of the reimbursement that the clinics pay for the device out of the reimbursement that they get for the telehealth session that currently Medicare and most major, just about every large major insurance provider is currently paying for telehealth. And what that means is that because the cost of the device is coming out of the reimbursement that clinicians are getting for the telehealth sessions that they're doing, this service is actually completely free to the patient, to the individual. If anybody is, if a patient is interested in getting a Motus hand bent or foot mentor device today, we actually would just help partner them or put them in contact, I should say, with one of our clinicians and clinics that we partner with, and they would be able to just get this device as part of the treatment that they would already get through the telehealth with their physical therapist or occupational therapist or clinician, I should say. And clinicians can also, we get clinicians that contact us all the time that say, hey, I've heard about your device, or even there are cases where their patients will tell their clinicians about the device, or they'll seen it in some research publication, and they'll be able to, we'll be able to train them remotely and get them started within a kind of a week or so, to being able to deploy these devices to use for their patients.
Yeah, and it can also help, skilled clinicians and providers maintain those caseloads, right? Because Dave said earlier on that, there are these density problems in clinics where there may be, you may not be able to have X number of clinicians there, and you may have a reduction in the number of patients that are allowed to be there. And so you can use telehealth as a way to maintain caseloads or keep people on caseload if they're, if you already have an existing relationship and they're just not comfortable coming into the clinic because of, fears of COVID. And so it can help existing relationships and maintaining those relationships over these challenging times.
Yeah, if a patient was coming in and now because of COVID, they can't get transport or they don't feel comfortable with doing in-person sessions because many of these stroke survivors are in these high-risk categories. They're on the older side. They have
some comorbid conditions.
Comorbid conditions, that's right. And they're forced to choose between getting health care and also their own health of possibly getting infected with COVID. This is our device, the hand mentor and foot mentor, has been a great solution to help bridge that gap, to help clinicians continue to treat and their patients and deliver care, and also getting reimbursed for the services that they're providing.
Because it does, I mean, if we're honest about it, it has to work for everyone involved, right? It has to work for the providers, and it has to work for the patients.
Well, speaking of which, actually, how intuitive is this device? Nick, you're a physiotherapist, so how intuitive
That's a great question.
Device that you taught to teach physiotherapists to use?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think one of the other, I'll quickly go back to what Dave was saying in terms of it has to be an effective device and it has to be economically feasible. The other side of that equation, kind of rounded off, is it has to be intuitive, it has to be engaging, it has to be easy to use in the home, right? Because now we don't have the ability to have someone there to technically help someone put it on. So that we've designed, many of our design sort of vectors have pointed us to make something that is really, really easy to use. That's the donning and doffing process. How hard is it to put on and take off? And how easy is it to navigate the actual interface? And we've spent many months, many hours trying to make sure these things are as easy to use as possible. Not only on the patient facing side, but also on the clinician facing side, on the provider side.
Yeah.
So we have done a number of things to make the sort of interfaces between the data that the device can capture and what the provider sees. We've done a lot of filtering to make sure that they are seeing a lot of relevant information. And try to make it as intuitive as possible.
And not too much information as well. That's another part of it, right?
It can be overload.
Because we're drawing in all this data. Perhaps a pitfall is presenting too much data and not enough of the relevant data.
Yep.
So in regards to the clinician dashboard, that what the clinician uses to remotely control the robotic device, it's really been designed and geared towards clinicians. It's been designed by a clinician,
Yep.
And we've gotten great feedback from the clinicians that currently use it in order to make it kind of as effective as possible in terms of allowing clinicians to practice their skilled care. And then on the patient side, right, this is we say robotics, we say exoskeletons, say AI, that can be intimidating. But I will say that, like Nick said, we've spent many hours making sure that it is very user friendly. So we have individuals ranging from as young as, I think,
5 years old.
5 years old. That was
5 years old to 98 years old.
98 years old was our oldest individual. We've had individuals, we've had users that have never turned on a computer before. We've had that comment. I've never turned on a computer before. Am I going to be able to use your device? And we said, we think you'll be able to do it. And lo and behold, they were able to, simply take the device out of a box, the brown box that's delivered by a UPS or FedEx. You just take it out, you plug it into the wall. The power cable still is, your familiar power cable. You plug it into the wall, you turn it on, and then there's a screen. It's a 22-inch high definition screen that immediately will, through video tutorials, kind of walk you through exactly what you need to do to put on the device. And so we've had a pretty good success with deploying these devices to a whole range of ages and a whole range of technology fluency. That's good. Technology fluency. To great success. And like Nick said, that certainly is another pillar that we focused on, because we really believe that the delivery of this care needs to be patient-centered. Just because you have a great scientific device, but if it's too expensive, or no one knows how to use it, or you can't get it to users, it's not, at the end of the day, it's not useful. So we've really taken to heart to addressing each of these issues, and we've had quite a bit of success thus far in kind of getting users up to speed and getting better with on our telehealth platform.
And that's one of the things that Motus, the company, really prides itself on. We are here to help make that telehealth delivery method as fluid and as seamless as possible. We realize that this often is the first time people may be doing things, clinicians may be doing things. So our job here is to make all of those technical and logistical considerations reduce the complexity as much as we can. So when we engage with sort of these patient and provider dyads, we make sure that all the technical details are handled. Like we make sure that the patient knows how to operate the Wi-Fi, how to operate the device itself in a technical way, how to put the device on, as well as providing the in-depth training for a provider that may not have any experience with robotic devices or telehealth. So we provide education to get everyone up to speed so we can be really successful in this delivery.
And
method.
all of this education is currently done completely remotely.
Yep.
We're sending devices to users, and they're being trained and onboarded without ever at any point having direct face-to-face contact with any other individual. For clinicians, we're able to train them as well remotely. I mean, it's kind of people. It's I don't know. It's paradoxical, but it's kind of almost by definition kind of thing where, because we're doing a telehealth delivery service, we actually want to train the individual, the clinician, with telehealth remotely, because that's how they're going to be delivering the care. If we had them come in, and a lot of clinicians ask, well, you're in Atlanta, how do I get trained with this? And it's not intuitive maybe at first, but no, don't physically come here. We'd like for you. We'll send you a device, and we can train you. We can, you can be the see what it's like to be a patient, and then you can be, you can do practice sessions through our dashboard. So very much in terms of the onboarding process for both patients and for users and for clinicians, bringing them up to speed is something that we're able to do with ease to basically every individual that we've come in contact with thus far in a range of technological fluency levels.
Great. Well, this device sounds incredible and sounds very helpful. I wish I had it when I was going through it, because I don't wish my life back at all. But now it's great. Is there anything else that you would like people, if people want to contact you, or is there any more thing else with the device people want to contact, not necessarily you, but Motus Nova, about this, more interested in this device and the hand mentor, the foot mentor, or just the company Motus Nova?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. You can I encourage anyone that's interested to please go to motusnova.com. That's motusnova.com, and you can see a kind of the device in action right there. We're talking about this device. I always find it difficult to describe it. Just kind of talking about it. I think seeing it is.
I have a picture, and I'll send it on.
Perfect. Picture and video is worth 1,000 words. And you please call us. You can call us at 404-738-5355. 404-738-5355. If you're either a clinician or a user that's interested in learning more, or perhaps integrating this into kind of as an option to some of your users, as a clinician, as an option to some of your patients, or as a patient, you want to add this to your current therapy, please reach out to us. Email. You can email us at support@motusnova.com, and we're happy to chat and get you squared away and seeing how we can help.
Oh, great. Do you want to just repeat that number one more time, or the web address one more time, just so it's ingrained in you?
Yeah, absolutely, sure. It's so the phone number is 404-738-5355, and that's a U.S. number, I should say. And then you can also go to motusnova.com. That's motusnova.com. motusnova. And you can email us as well. Support I don't know how to spell SUPPORT, support@motusnova.com. And whatever your concerns are, your patient, clinician, clinic owner, or just curious, we're always happy to talk. And about how we can help.
Great. This is a fascinating interview. I love the combination of AI and telehealth and physiotherapy and for brain injury specifically. That's just, I think, such a great fit. And actually, I just have one final question. Just ask about where is this now? Like, where have you sold it, and where do you sell it? Generally, do you sell it to insurance companies, or to hospitals, or to clinics?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are selling the device to clinics, to hospitals. There's a map on our website of the about 200 locations,
all the deployed locations
across the country that have clinics and hospitals that have Motus devices. Some of the top hospitals, highest ranked, nationally ranked hospitals in the country has our devices. But I would say currently our biggest demand for our device is in this telehealth setting, directly to individuals, directly to patients,
or to small clinics, and
directly to clinics.
Yep.
Yeah, we deal with clinics that are that have 30 locations with hundreds of clinicians, and then we also deal with clinics that have
one. Maybe one clinician,
single run clinicians.
Yeah.
We don't just we love to work with everyone.
Yep.
Really, it's we firmly believe in trying to help clinicians and patients in every step of the way possible to kind of get them treating and get them better again.
Okay, well, I think this is a great device, and tell anybody to visit Motus Nova. Sorry, repeat that. MotusNova.com and find out more. And thank you both, David and Nick.
Yeah.
Or Dr. Nick Housley, G.O. David Wu. And yes, thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Nick, for having us. We had a fantastic time, and best of luck to you and all of your listeners.
Thank you.
Very good. Stay safe.
Thanks, Nick.
You too. You too.
I apologize for the recording. My recording software is MIA. I don't know where it is or where I hid it or deleted it or whatever. But thank you for listening so much, and thank you to David Wu and Nick Housley. It was a great discussion. And please, I usually ask you to please listen or view my website, but in this instance, I would just like to ask you to please either subscribe or rate or both. That'd be great. My podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and wherever else. And thank you all for listening. I hope you listen again soon. As always, music at the beginning of this podcast is by Ben Sound. www.bensound.com.